Hi, welcome to the Clinical Trial Information Channel. Today we will be discussing the ethics of clinical trials. Clinical trials are scientific and medical tests on consenting humans to advance medical technology and treatments. Ever since the more widespread knowledge of human testing in World War II, many organizations have gathered to ensure the safety of patients volunteering for these trials. There have been controversy surrounding this topic due to loose guidelines and lack of information known by participants and physicians involved. Other reasons for controversy can be due to the use of coercion and conflicts of interest. Now let's hear about some controversial trials from history. Take it away, Claire.
Thank you, Mars. Clinical trials became a hugely controversial subject during World War II. During this time period, there was little precaution and safety measures provided to the subjects being tested on. For example, in 1944, 17-year-old Navy seaman Nathan Schneerman underwent a clinical trial to test protective clothing for the Navy. He was given a gas mask and special clothing and placed in a small chamber which was then locked from the outside. Sulfur, mustard, and lewisite, which are poisonous gases used in chemical weapons during the war, were released into the chamber, and for 1 hour a day for 5 days, Schneerman had to sit in the gas-filled chamber unable to leave. On the 5th day, he began to experience symptoms such as nausea and a burning throat. He asked to leave, but was told he had to stay in the chamber for the extent of the trial. He then passed out and went into cardiac arrest. He was given no medical treatment and told not to speak of the trial under the threat of treason. Another hugely controversial and unethical clinical trial that took place in American history was in 1932. It is referred to as the Tuskegee Studies. 600 African American men, 399 of which were infected with syphilis, were told they would be undergoing a treatment for bad blood, which was a term that referred to different ailments such as syphilis. However, this was not true. The participants were not informed that the study was actually to document the progress of syphilis without any treatment. The study was supposed to only be 6 months long, but in reality, it went on for multiple decades. In 1972, the study was found to be unethical and it was ended. And in 1997, President Clinton issued a formal apology for the incident. Since then, more regulations have been put into place, but the ethics of clinical trials are still in question. Now to you, Phoebe.
Thank you, Claire. Just after World War II, the Nuremberg Code was created. This document was a 10-point statement on the guidelines for future human testing. These points highlighted that participation must be voluntary, as well as ideas surrounding the necessity and risks of the treatment. Although the points made were just guidelines, it shaped future documents that are still relevant today. Some of the most controversial content in the document is from Section C, where it is stated that the use of placebo in studies can be used to help the study, and that all participants should be assured that the treatment they received was the best, regardless of what they actually received. In 1979, the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research was created in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and they issued a report titled Ethical Principles and Guidelines for the Protection of Human Subjects of Research, or also known as the Belmont Report. Some of the highlighted information includes the necessity of informed consent that the patient can understand, as well as if there is a case where comprehension or the ability to give consent may be limited. The National Research Act of 1974 created not only the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical Behavioral Research, but it also created the Common Rule. The Common Rule has since been updated since its creation in 1974, but its main purpose was to be the one set of regulations that all federally connected research follows. The rules are upheld locally through the Institutional Review Board, or the IRB, and they evaluate the different processes of clinical trials. A controversial section in the Common Rule is the informed consent section. The document states that if the IRB deems the research not a risk and meets other criteria for not being harmful, they can modify or even waive the informed consent process in the clinical trial. The Common Rule is still being updated today, but many trials are still considered controversial even with these rules and the localized IRB. Now, let's hand it off to Lauren.
Thanks, Phoebe. One controversial trial that happened recently was the ischemia trial. This trial, which was funded by the National Institute of Health, or the NIH, in 2011, had around 5,000 patients in order to determine the best type of management strategy for high-risk patients. The COURAGE trial, which was created 10 years before the ischemia trial, found no clinical benefit for stenting over optimal medical therapy and found that heart attacks weren't caused by large blockages, but many much smaller blockages. The goal of the ischemia trial was created to resolve any lingering questions after the COURAGE trial, but controversy rose after the endpoint of the trial was changed, and the investigators never told the public of the change after they couldn't get enough participants to enroll in the trial. Some of the results after this change may be unreliable since neither patients nor physicians are blinded to their treatment assignments. And back to Mara.
Thanks, Lauren. There are a couple possible solutions to the clinical trial ethical dilemma. The main idea of most solutions is for the FDA to create safer and more restrictive guidelines and regulations, and to enforce them more consistently. One example of the solution to this problem is a program called Illuminate by eClinical Solutions. It is a database which clinical trials use to hold all the information and data regarding the trial. It organizes the data and allows the patients to see what is happening in the trial. eClinical Solution uses graphs and visual representations to allow patients an easier understanding of the trial. Another solution to this problem would be to stop all clinical trials. This would eliminate the problem, but it may also halt medical advancement. Clinical trials in other countries. In 2014, the European Union passed new laws regarding the regulation of clinical trials. In the new rules, there is more uniform process of authorizing proposed trials. The applications for trials will be online, and the information and data throughout the trial are completely accessible online via a portal. They also enforce shorter time limits to ensure the safety of patients. This is an example of solving the ethical dilemma behind clinical trials. It increased safety but allowed continued advances of medical research. Now back to Phoebe to wrap it up.
Thanks, Mara. In conclusion, there are pros and cons to every clinical trial. In the past, they have been harmful to patients, but now there's new technology, guidelines, and universal regulations to enforce safer conditions for patients. It is still a highly controversial topic because there are always unknown factors to every clinical trial. Thanks for watching!